And we're live.
We were live. Now I look rude because I'm looking down at my phone to find the tweet.
Well, I'll give an intro while you retweet it to the BowTied community. So we got BowTiedOx, Alex, round two. Round one, BowTiedOx was a little bit nervous. Let's talk about the nerves before we get into round two, where you feel much more calm.
I don't even know why. Because I remember I did a YouTube video, like a YouTube Q&A live stream on StreamYard.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was panicking, like the whole like adrenaline's coursing, hearts at like, I don't know. It's like, it's not public speaking, but there's a lot of people viewing. So it's like, to whatever reason, it's like, to me, feels like public speaking. But today I'm like, oh yeah, I don't care. It's Alex.
Do you think that there's some like military PTSD in there?
No, I don't have any, except for, so it's called like an arty sim, an artificial sim, and it sounds like a mortar round. And it's not because of anything that's happened to me. It's because that's how they used to like wake us up. So when I hear it, I freak out.
Yeah. Well, if you hear it enough, you can anticipate it, and then you get adrenaline from the anticipation. I know when I played baseball for like years after I was done, I had PTSD symptoms just from like the adrenaline when a ball would get hit to you in front of 5,000 people. And I still probably am 10% of the way there. But, I think working in mostly relaxed environments, certainly compared to competitive sports for several years, where I knew I wasn't going to like show up to work and get fired that day, which was always a question as a professional athlete, sort of allowed me to reset my physiology and return to civilian life in, obviously a different way than most people live their civilian lives. But, I could fit in well enough to hold a job.
Yeah, I'm screwed. Luckily, I'll probably never work for someone again. But if I ever had to go back to corporate America, I'm done. I could not do it. Like, what's acceptable for me, like in a team environment? Oh, I'm an HR. I'm just going to be an HR just heathen. Like, they are just going to get rid of me in week one. They're going to be like, hey, you can't like yell and swear at people when they don't do something right. I'm like, why? Like,
well, what are you supposed to do when they don't do something right?
Like, I thought like calling everyone an idiot was the right answer. I guess I'm wrong.
Do you want me to tell them they're smart when they're dumb? You want me to lie to them? Are you telling me to lie to them? Because that's unethical.
I question your ethics if you want me to lie.
Well, I think that's the misconception with HR, and fortunately for you, perhaps unfortunately, because it doesn't put you in a position to advise others who have, but fortunate that you've avoided the experience, is HR. I always felt HR, at least at large companies, is the most dishonest group in the company. And a lot of times it's because I didn't realize this for my first 2 years of Google. Until I saw the org chart and I saw the head of HR reported to the CFO, which is, I think, normal in most organizations, but surprised me because they always presented HR as like, oh, we're the business partner. It's like, okay, so HR is there to maximize, the productivity, whatever. Well, if they're productivity maximizers, they would sit under the business org. The fact that they sit under the finance org suggested to me correctly that the job of HR is to minimize costs associated with employment. And of course, churn is a cost. So if everybody's quitting because they hate their boss, that would fall under HR because they need to spend money to keep people retained. But they don't actually care about you. They care about you not suing them. They care about thousands of people quitting or dozens of people quitting because they have a boss that they don't like. But they don't care about you and your concerns.
That is a very strange dynamic. Like, because I've never worked with HR. Like, the military definitely doesn't have HR. But they do, but not in the
HR is the medical doctors who are injecting you with vaccines in the military, right?
We have human resources, but they just process awards and paperwork. Like, they don't do actual, like, I'm not going to go up to them. Like, it'd be that our shops are like S shops of section. HR's S1, the human resources, but like, you don't go to them like, hey, so my team leader called me a fucking idiot yesterday and he punched me in the face. Like they'd be like, oh, good for him. Like,
My drill sergeant said the only thing they had from Texas are steers and queers.
and you sure as hell don't have horns.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think HR existed when Full Metal Jacket came out at any company.
No, right now it's like I guess the equivalent's like inspector general. So they'll come in, or like you have equal opportunity reps and all this stuff. And if it's bad enough, it's gotten the environment, even in special operations, is it's inhibiting your job because privates need to be treated in a way that you're like the ultimate assertion of dominance. Because in combat, they need to not question you.
Right.
You have experience, they don't. You need to be just a complete authoritarian figure to them. There's no questioning anything you do. So to do that, to instill that discipline, whatever, and because it's fun, there's like a lot of teasing and all that.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like you call someone the R word, which I won't even say here because we'll both get banned on Twitter. You're done. Like they will literally open a case on you and you violated equal opportunity. And like, let's say you're a staff sergeant in E6, you'll be walking around as an E4 specialist. They'll strip your rank, take half your pay. Like they,
which is interesting because you literally can't join the military if you are designated by a psychologist as being mentally retarded. Can you?
No, well, if you go by the IQ standard, though, I think it's below, is it below 75 or below 70? That's clinical retardation. And then the minimum ASFABs, the aptitude, is I think a 31 or a 33 to be infantry. And I want to say those would be a 31 on the ASFAB would be pretty close to a 70 IQ. So there's some borderline guys.
Okay. So perhaps that could actually be a classifiable thing that could be said and not legally allowed.
But in SOF, you have to have a 110 general technician score. So yeah, there's no one in SOF would technically be clinically retarded. So yeah, I guess it's a harmless insult. Not true.
I don't know how that would stand with the military HR. It was clearly not true because they wouldn't be able to be here if that were true. So we are obviously providing equal opportunities.
Yeah, I've been in 5 years and it was actually like rough. Like things were still cool when I joined. And I would say in the last 3 years, like we're talking I forget how to do the hands when I'm here because it's reversed. We're talking like straight boom and like tolerance for anything. And when I was a private, like they used to have a game, they'd be like, you know what the fastest way to get a private to go up the stairs? And everyone would be like, ha, no, sergeant. And they would have a broomstick and they would shove it up a dude's ass and be like, this is the fastest way to get a private to go up the stairs. Nowadays, you're getting kicked out of the military.
Which is interesting because nobody's like tying this to performance on the field, right? I joked where, where's the Taliban's diversity and inclusion officer? Where's the CCP's diversity and inclusion officer? Right? These are the ostensibly largest foreign threats to the United States, and they don't have the things that we have that we say make us great, yet they still beat us. So clearly, there's a lapse in assumptions going on. How do you know that these new things that are being implemented are actually helping the armed forces when the record seems to suggest that they are exactly doing the opposite?
Lethality is it's going away. I want to say gone. I mean, there's obviously still some good guys left, a lot of really good guys left, but the focus is not lethality. It is literally, I've been telling people for a while because there's a huge misconception what the military is. Not the whole 20 years of the global war on terrorism, but the last decade almost, really starting in the later, or earlier 2010, 2012, it became a soft war, just special operations forces, like that's it. And the army really, well, the military as a whole really went from a fighting force where every unit was seeing action in early Iraq, early Afghanistan, to the conventional forces weren't doing that anymore. And it really became a jobs program. Like that's all it is. Military largely now, and especially now we're going to a peacetime. I think, I don't know what Russia's up to right now, but presumably peacetime. It's going to get even worse. But I had a really good conversation with someone on Twitter, and they were like, well, is the military being a jobs program a bad thing? Because it is true for a lot of people, the military is their only option. It's the streets or join the military, which is, so what's better if you take a guy out of the streets and you put him in the military and you actually give him a profession, teach him a skill set, because there are skills, like not everyone's infantry, and, put him in an actual, or her, I'll be inclusionary, in an actual, productive environment. And then you're taking someone potentially off the streets that either A, is living impoverished or whatever. And then the argument is like, well, the military pays them blah, blah, taxpayer dollars. It's like, yes, but a lot of the demographic that joins was going to end up on federal assistance anyway. So it's like, is it wrong that it's a jobs program? The only reason I think it's a bad jobs program is because then they justify more budget and they spend it on more useless stuff. Like,
right. Well, I mean, this is kind of the the traditional criticisms of communism, right? Because my first job after I got done playing minor league baseball was working at a hedge fund in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong being a special administrative region of China, we're obviously very familiar with China and CCP policies. And my boss mentioned to me, like, my first month or two on the job, China's view of the economy is different than in the United States. In the United States, they're more focused, though not completely obviously, but more focused on productivity. Whereas in China, a big goal of the CCP is to have near full employment, because when you have near full employment, you're less likely to incentivize factions to build within your country that might overthrow you. But it's obviously expensive to do that, and incredibly inefficient when you do that.
Yeah, that's why it's so tough, because I have, obviously we all do, we have ideas and how we want the way to work, how we want the world to work, and then how it actually works is just
very different.
Just so different.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. If people don't understand the military, it's kind of funny what everyone, when I was joining, what I thought it was and what it was, two different, not even worlds, two different parallel dimensions. Like it's not even close to what people think it is.
Well, and that was very similar to my experience as a Division I athlete, because I, going into college, I kind of thought, oh, this is what it's going to be like as an SEC baseball player. You're going to have all this glory, which I'm sure they pitch military recruits on. I mean, how else do you get people to risk their life? And, when you get in, it's like, man, this is hard. This is really hard work. And so, I don't know. It was the hardest 4 years of my life. I'm glad in retrospect that I did it, because it prepared me for, the working world. And I could see patterns that a lot of other people around me couldn't see, because, part of playing elite sports is understanding manipulation, and your coach is going to manipulate you to get what he perceives to be the best out of you. But if you disagree with him and his perception of what's best for you, then you look at the verbal tools that he uses, and you say, okay, these are just control mechanisms. And then if you're smart and you realize that these are not the only people who use verbal control mechanisms, you can apply these same frameworks to how corporations work and how governments run. And then all of a sudden, when you see somebody with some famous person, powerful person talking, you're like, well, this person's totally full of shit, because I've seen this 50 different times. I've just, this guy just happens to be wearing a suit and a tie when he's, playing the same game that I've seen playing over and over again.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that your experience as a college athlete, I think it actually might have been harder in special operations. It's the same world. Like we're both different, obviously nuanced, but we were in the same world. So I think that's why we also have this understanding, because like, it's, I would say the parallels of, special operations and, D1 baseball or D1 athletics in general. It's it's your life. It's so demanding and all that. Yeah, you really learn. Yeah, that dynamic that you're talking about, and it becomes very apparent with how just the verbiage used and everything of how it's control.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to some extent I personally probably overcorrected for that in some ways where, you mentioned never being able to take a corporate job again. I wouldn't be able to, work as probably a startup employee for that reason, because I can look at the math and I'm like, okay, so you founder, you're getting 100 times more equity than I'm getting, or you're getting 400 times more equity than I'm getting. Do you think you're 400 times more valuable than I am to this company? And typically in a sports context, it's very confrontational. And so if somebody is getting paid 400 times more than you, you have a chance to compete head to head against that person and demonstrate, like, well, maybe he should only be getting paid 200 times more than you, or 20 times, or 2 times. But that direct route of competition does not exist in the corporate world. They actually want to segment work in a way that disempowers you to make the case that you are as valuable as certain executives. Um, and so I've had a lot of friends who've worked tirelessly to build other people's startups, only to find out, because they didn't do a good job negotiating their offer in the beginning, only to find out, like, hey, those millions of dollars of options that you think you have are actually only worth like a couple $100,000. So good for you for working and learning for these last several years, but you really provided them with a charitable contribution of your effort and of your emotional commitment. Too bad.
That's so messed up. The whole landscape of corporate America right now. I tweeted about it earlier. How the incentive structure of the world and really the corporate climate is society climate, if that, you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Corporate climate creates actual culture in this country, and how it's just incentivized to, yeah, it's dangling a carrot.
Yeah.
And then the second you are not perceived, did you see the video? It went viral. It was a Zoom meeting, and the guy's
Yeah, the
like,
dude firing everybody.
last year I did this, I cried. And just that cutthroat decision, like the inhumanness of it, of
Mhm.
just like, I'm pretty sure I just invented a word, of like, hey, holidays are coming up and whatever, but like, fuck you, you guys. And I love how the last point he makes in that video is in productivity, and then
Right.
you're all gone. And what's funny, it's like those executives, how productive are they? And how much is it that they have a 20-year-old intern that's hung over every day actually doing the work while
Sure.
they're the figurehead? And
Right. Well, I mean, this is like the classical case of Karl Marx, right? Where, and unfortunately, the job of an executive, it's a different job than the job of a ground level employee. So, the job of the executive is to motivate the ground level employee, right? Like if you're a 5-star general, it doesn't really matter how good of a marksman you are.
mhm.
And if you're a better marksman than the next general, it doesn't mean that you're going to get that 5-star, 5th star before he does, because you're being evaluated on different things than what you were evaluated in 20 years prior. And so you might say, yeah, he has an intern that does all his work, but to be fair to the executive, how did the intern get found? Was it through a program that he sponsored, right? Because on some level, the work doesn't get done by itself. You need to decide to allocate capital towards recruitment. You need to decide to allocate capital towards PR, branding. And if the recruitment, the PR, or the branding all convinced that intern to come work really hard for $12 an hour, that is kind of to the credit of the executive who's not doing the work and found somebody to do it better for cheaper.
You got to get, that's capitalism, baby.
Yeah.
That's the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And capitalism functions best when people don't realize that they're objectified, right? Because there is no real alternative. You cannot legally force companies to be nice, because there's no legal definition of nice. And anytime you create a definition, all they're going to do is get a bunch of lawyers and figure out, well, do we really have to do this? Do we really have to do that? Are they enforcing this? And if it's like really important, then they'll find somebody who may be in a position to hurt them and pay them for consulting fees or speaking fees, right? Which that's how politicians and enforcement agency officials get paid off, is they get paid off their speaking fees and revolving door engagements after they get done with their role with the SEC or their role as Treasury Secretary or their role as Fed Chairman. And it's kind of like an open secret that these are bribes that these people are taking, but they're legally allowed to engage in private commercial activity. And how can you prove that it's a bribe? Well, you can't. So it happens.
Well, good old Nancy and Yellen. $200 million, sitting in Congress.
Yeah, I know. Harry Truman, Mr. A-bomb himself, I think he said probably after he got done with his political career, like the only way you can get rich as a politician is if you're a crook. And I don't know how many people remember this 70 years later.
They make what? And it's really crazy if you look at it. They make, I don't know if they get housing stipends or anything like that. I'm very ignorant to this. But isn't it $200,000 a year?
It's something to that extent. 175. Senior members might get more, but it's like approximately 200K. So somehow Ms. Pelosi, yeah,
is extremely expensive. Like,
right,
200,000 sounds like if you're from the Midwest, wherever, that sounds like a lot of money. In DC, that is not a lot of money. No. Their net worths in 10, 20, 30 years is like, oh yeah, I'm worth $30 million. It's like, come on.
Right. But when you think about buy low, sell high, everybody says wealth building, you buy low, sell high. And you can do that in crypto if you have a esoteric view of the markets that other people don't have. But if you're a politician, buy low, sell high, you literally have the legislative capacity to change the value of your investments. So you can buy land that is not usable for 99 out of 100 buyers. Oh, by the way, you're part of a roads committee that decides that we're going to take taxpayer dollars and that rural, the rural 300 acres that you bought in the middle of nowhere, all of a sudden there's going to be a road that's a mile away from it. And that real estate investment, which you bought on leverage because you got a loan from a bank that's trying to curry favor from you because you couldn't substantiate that loan with the $200,000 W-2, all of a sudden, that $6 million real estate investment becomes a $12 million asset. Then you made your first $6 while you're only making $200K a year.
Yeah, this is going to show my ignorance and how much I don't care about politics. What's his name? It's Buttigieg or
Buttigieg. Buttigieg. Yeah.
Apparently he was mayor or something of a town and the sidewalk went to his house and then stopped.
Yeah. Well, I think that happened in San Francisco. Gavin Newsom had a lot of business dealings. And I remember when I was first moving into the city, I think Newsom wasn't mayor at the time, but he had recently ceased to be mayor. And I was checking out apartments. I hadn't yet moved in. And I was like, couldn't find parking, finally found a spot. And it was after 6 p.m. So I'm like, okay, meter's good. I don't need to pay. I come back like a few hours later after I got a beer with my friend and my car was gone. I'm like, what? And I look up and there's this no parking from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. sign that's hidden behind this bush that I didn't see. And so I had to go. I paid $450 to get my car out of the tow lot where it sat for 25 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, whatever. Sometimes you get kicked in the balls. And then 2 weeks later, I get a notice in the mail saying you also owe us another $170. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I looked and I realized that the $400 that I paid was $220 to the tow lot and a $180 processing fee. I'm like, well, processing fee? I buy something online through Eventbrite. The processing fee is $4. You're charging me $180 to process this? Who's getting rich off of that? And why was that even a no parking spot in the first place? I can park there on Thursday. I can park there on Wednesday. Oh, because it was in front of a strip club, and the strip club wanted to keep that spot so they could use it for valet service or whatever it is they wanted. Total auctioning by public officials of public assets, likely to enrich or empower themselves.
It's sad because it already's bad if you look at the big picture of it. It's already bad. And then when you actually get into the nitty gritty, of what is really going on, I'm surprised tar and feathers aren't more commonly around. In FBI, I'm not an insurrectionist or anything. So,
Well, you're surprised at that. I'm surprised that bridges aren't falling down left and right
I was talking
because
about like a week ago because I was traveling back, and this bridge is just rust, and it was
Mhm.
built in like the 60s, and I'm just like, I'm scared right now.
Right, right, and it's like, I've been in tech organizations where the software engineers who are paid much better than civil engineers who are responsible for constructing these bridges. Well, the software engineers who make $300,000 a year create products with bugs all the time. And do they know that there's bugs when the product ships? No, they find out later. So, what do you think the civil engineer who's making $72,000 a year is doing with his bridge? Do you think there's bugs in the bridge? Probably. There's inspectors that look for those, but are the inspectors incentivized? What happens if the inspectors miss something, right? Are they fined? Are they fired? Probably not. And then you just got to drive over the bridge and hope it doesn't fall down. And somehow they're not falling down left and right. But I know from watching how most people work. Most people's work ethic is very, very poor. They're not going to be very diligent about the details that matter as far as keeping a bridge erect. So perhaps it's only a matter of years before these bridges just start falling down, and then they'll blame it on like climate change or something like that, rather than a complete lack of work ethic by the American workforce.
Yeah, it's so true. You grow up, and when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I'm an engineer. You just assume, oh, they're just so great at their job, like whatever. And then when you actually get into the workforce, you're like, no one actually cares. Like
Yeah,
there's not a single person on this, minus a handful, that actually just care about their job. The only people that really care about their jobs are people that run the companies. The employees, no, I don't. Like, let's be
right,
honest, that bridge falls. The guy that builds it, he probably doesn't even care. He's like, oh, that sucks. Whoops,
right,
we messed
right.
up.
And you got to look at what the Romans did. It's like, okay, you're going to sleep under that bridge. We trust that that's going to keep it erect.
So
And
that's a good
it
example.
did. Guess
That's
what? Yeah. I mean,
that's
that's how they should compensate all civil servants, is like live under the thing you're building. And if the thing you're building collapses, so do your assets and your life.
that's why performance-based pay is so. I think that's probably the best incentive program.
Yeah.
Like, yes, sure, some people are going to hit their quota, but if you can make a great commission off something or great performance-based bonus or whatever, you'll work a little bit hard, especially if it's pretty much limitless upside. You'll work harder.
You
It,
will, but then the game inside the game is, and I definitely saw this when I was working at Google. If you create that um, performance incentive system and it's not done appropriately, then you end up incentivizing your employees to defraud the company, right?
that's
Because look, salesmen are smart and they're not just good at ripping their customers off, or maybe they are good at ripping their customers off, but let's acknowledge that their customers are also their employers, because you're good at talking and they're good at identifying the loopholes. And so if you create an incentive structure that has them booking, revenue X instead of revenue Y, even though revenue Y is, more longer lasting, and revenue X is kind of flash in the pan revenue, isn't worth as much. The effective loophole finder salesman will be one of the most productive employees on paper and one of the least productive employees in actuality. He's just figuring out how to assign his name perhaps to revenue that was going to come in anyway, right? As I saw many times when I was working at Google. Or he's going to, figure out ways to incentivize clients to spend money um, in large quantities that will not suggest that that client's going to be happy with his experience working with the company, but that employee is going to get paid the commission after the first quarter. And if that company doesn't want to, wants to sever their relationship with, the salesman's employer a year down the line, too bad, you already paid him out for it.
That's so true. My best friend, he's actually his name Bowtied Trout. Don't ask me how I came up with that. He does sales, and yeah, when you see how salesmen operate, not all of them, but they'll know they're getting a bad lead,
Yeah.
but they just, dress up the offer and be like, look, you can do this for 45 days and then cancel if you don't want to, because he knows at 45 days he gets paid his full commission, where the company's probably bleeding, but assuming they have, a customer lifetime value of,
Right.
$400, it costs 300 to acquire, they're going to make $100 profit. But if they cancel, after 45 days, the company makes 150 and they still have to pay the sales guy,
Right. And
whatever.
then the smart thing for the company is to track that and to make sure that the salespeople don't have like, your cancellation rate can't exceed X, or we're going to claw back your year-end bonus or something like that. But things move fast, and usually that problem needs to exist before it gets solved for. And so there's going to be a multi-quarter gap where the sales reps will take advantage of that gap in their evaluation. And too bad if you didn't create that right. That's why incentives are so important. And I think that's something that politicians don't quite understand, or are choosing to be ignorant of, is in a capitalist system, incentives aren't perfect. Clearly, exploitation exists. Clearly, capitalism is basically exploiting people, but we haven't figured out a better way to incentivize people to do work that meaningfully contributes to the advancement of society in any other way. And even though that it's gross, it's immoral, it's dishonest in many ways, it's actually better than any alternative that's ever been constructed.
That's the craziest part, is we could go on for hours, days, talking about the downsides of capitalism, but the upsides of capitalism is that I can go to the grocery store and I can go buy chicken for $1. They moved it up 2 cents. It's now $1.71 a pound, but I can still get chicken at $1.71 a pound. I can go to the grocery store, and instead of picking generic brand X, I have like 20 options.
Yeah.
Um, that's something that's big. And whenever someone much smarter than me figures out how we can align incentives to where people can profit, they can be lazy because people want to be lazy, and we can also actually contribute greatly to society. Whoever figures this puzzle out, I think, has been the biggest puzzle since the dawn of man. Whoever can figure out that incentive structure, he might make world peace. He might.
Well, but the thing is, it's already been figured out, right? Like a lot of people online, I don't work that much, right? I make pretty good money. I mean, very good money by American standards, but pretty decent money. And I'm providing value to people, right? Nobody would be buying my products or signing up to work with me in a group or one-on-one setting if they didn't feel like they were meaningfully improving. But because I can distribute content through an account that people find value in following, that means like I can actually get more done in 3 hours than a lot of people can get done in 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get paid more in 3 hours than a lot of people can get paid in 12. And
That,
so nobody had to figure that out. That's how a free market economy works.
that's so true, because I feel good about the work I'm doing. Like the coaching, writing, all of this. I feel really, there is no like gross feeling of what you're doing.
Right.
It's pure. Like my goal, and it's funny because everything I'm doing, the goal is not even profit. Yeah, that's cool. But the goal, money becomes this like secondary effect.
Sure.
And really, you're just genuinely like, okay, how can I be useful? What is going to help you? And then it's a selfish incentive, but it works for everyone, because I'm like, okay, what's going to help people the most, because that's going to drive me the most traffic, and that's going to help increase my revenue. But then the flip side of that is you're getting an extremely high quality product.
Right.
So yeah, the creator economy, which I think we're moving more to that. Not everyone's going to be able to take advantage, because just not everyone can hack.
Be smart.
Yeah, not everyone's smart. So, but for talented individuals, the future with the internet and like everything that's going to transpire for the foreseeable hundreds of years, it's going to be very, very, very good for creators, because you can just provide a really good service, everyone wins.
Right.
And
Well, you know who doesn't win is public school teachers,
yeah,
right? And they're, they're always complaining, oh, we're underpaid, we're under resourced. It's like, you know what we are? You and I are teachers, right? And comedians say the same thing. Oh, it's really hard to make it in comedy. You and I are professional teachers. We're professional comedians. That's why people follow us, right? We also, and if you're good at one, you don't have to be as good at the other. So clearly there are better comedians than me. Clearly there's better teachers than me. But there's many fewer people who can kind of be, like make fun of themselves, make fun of everything that's going on, and also have a unique insight that can deliver value to their students. And so, um, teachers aren't underpaid. They're actually just choosing the wrong forum to distribute their message. And they're not good enough at the accessory skills that enable people to get attention, right? I said, I've thought for years the best math teachers should make $100 million a year. If you can teach 4 million Americans how to do arithmetic better, you should make $100 million a year. That's an incredibly valuable service, because otherwise, those 4 million kids are going to get taught, say 30 people in a classroom. Those 4 million kids are going to get taught by 133 teachers. Maybe the math class is, going to be a quarter of what they teach. So it's going to be 35,000 teaching salaries. All right. Well, 35,000 teaching salaries times, say, 40,000 a year on average is 140 million. So presently we are already paying more people more money to teach 4 million kids how to do arithmetic. A more efficient way would be to find the best person in the country and have that person teach off YouTube, which is already happening. I think the other day I retweeted someone where there's this girl who's really good at Excel and she makes like $100,000 some days. So
wow.
I don't know, maybe she makes 20,000 on an average day, 100,000 on some days. And so she's probably making $5-10 million a year teaching Excel, right?
For her,
And yeah, and are there other people who know Excel as well as her? Almost certainly. Are there other people who understand marketing as well as her? Almost certainly. But she's been able to pair those two skills and offer, what the market perceives to be a unique value proposition. So they pay her. Good. I am all for that. I am not for, taxing her because she's been successful in redistributing those taxes to other teachers who are not as good as her at teaching. Like, because you're then telling them it's okay that you're not as good at your job, and you don't actually really need to watch her and learn her game. Because as an athlete, if you get cut from a team and there's a guy who's a superstar, a global superstar, he's making $7 million a year, you're not going to just bitch and moan and say, well, the organization should take a portion of his salary and give it to me. You're going to say, what is that guy doing with his approach that I'm not doing? Is he stronger than me? Is he faster than me? If he's not, then he's better at something. And then you just pay attention to why you're being outcompeted by people who you don't think are better than you. And this goes to one of your tweets I think you wrote maybe yesterday, the day before. If you're not that smart, just copy someone who's smart, right? You're not going to do it as well as them because they're smart and you're not smart. But you're probably going to get a much better result than trying to create your own system with your dumb brain that doesn't really make sense compared to replicating a system that's proven to work, albeit replicating it at a B level, because you're not going to be able to do it as well as the initial creator. Like, what do we want from a society? Do we want a bunch of people creating products and services that nobody wants? Or do we want people paying attention to the other people who are creating products and services that are valuable to other people and then replicating their actions to where they can create and distribute value themselves too?
It's the talent stack. Like, what? So if you could deductively break it down, like fitness, diet, everything we do, like, okay, I know a lot about this. Okay, what do I need to do to just, all you do is reverse engineer it to get it to people? What do I need to know how to do? Well, knowing how to tweet. Well, I don't know how to tweet. Well, look at someone whose content you enjoy and figure out kind of how they do it. Okay, boom. There's a skill you just developed right there. You now know how to tweet. Now, how do I deliver content? What's the right way to package this and present, to them? Oh, I don't know. Go buy something and figure out how they did it. Boom. Now you know how to do that. And then think like to yourself, like, okay, this guy's really good. He's very successful. He's doing this. What is something, if we're doing close to the same thing, what gives me my edge? Like, what's a little twist I can make? And boom, then you add that skill set, and now you are unique, and you now carve a percent of the market because you're providing something that's completely unique, even though it is maybe one different variable from what everyone else is doing, but it's your thing.
Right. And the challenge for this, and I think, I've tweeted about this. I believe it's true. I'm sure you agree. We're going through a transition as a society away from institutions and towards individuals, while at the same time, certain institutions are gaining power clearly, as we're seeing, the governments rolling up power and assigning themselves rights and responsibilities that they never had 3 years ago or couldn't conceivably have 3 years ago. But trust in institutions is dwindling. So 40 years ago, if you want to be, you have a reasonable job, you go learn a trade, you learn how to be a plumber, you learn how to be a lawyer, you learn how to be a physical therapist, you learn from somebody who knows how to do it, and then you take a test that demonstrates the basics of what that job requires. Now, what that doesn't do is it doesn't tell you how to make money. And because it doesn't tell you how to make money, a lot of people who go through these credentialing systems, they get to the other end and they're like, well, I know all this, and why did I go to school? And there's no jobs. It's like, well, you actually didn't get trained to get a job. You got trained to pass a Scantron test, right? So you don't actually know how to do the thing that your degree says you know how to do. You just know how to not kill people, hopefully, doing that job. That's what the degree says, is what the existing studies say. And if you learn from a university system, or if you learn from any mass market information distribution center, what you learn is by design or by definition not differentiated from what the guy sitting to your right is learning too. So you get tested on the same material, you get graded, you take the same test and you get a score that shows, okay, you retained 70% of this information, you retained 80% of this information, you retained 90% of this information. But when you get to the top, the guys who are retaining 93, 94, 95% of the information, guess what? They're retaining the same information. They're not differentiated compared to each other, so they have no unique value proposition.
That's why you always see, not always, but people that end up successful, either A, or on that end of the spectrum, the outlier that retained 99%, like just amazing. And they just were able to more efficiently do this job. Like they could just figure out how to cut, more corners, and they were just better. Or they were absolutely terrible. They couldn't, I'll speak from experience. I couldn't sit in a classroom. I couldn't do that because I guess I don't like to call myself smart. I like to just assume I'm dumb, and then that makes life easier. But I never saw what I was doing there as even remotely worthwhile for a second. So it just was struggle, because obviously if you really don't see the benefit in something, you're just not going to try. And
that's actually goes back to the teachers, because one thing as an influencer, as a creator, you need to have a good pulse on, do people give a shit, right? Where bad teachers, you can keep a bad teaching job for 30 years and have no understanding if your audience doesn't give a shit, right? Oh, the kid's not paying attention, that's the kid's fault. Oh, these students are lazy, that's the student's fault. It's like, well, if I'm trying to sell products and put food on my table and nobody wants to buy them, it's not their fault. It's my fault. I need to figure out a way to thread that needle to get my message out better, in a way that's enticing to people, so they pay attention to me and then they can learn from me. But that's the market incentivizing creators to deliver content that's easily ingestible by their audience, and school is none of that.
that teacher actually might be considered then a good teacher because, oh, students do bad in their class. He's a hard teacher. And so he's a good teacher because people don't do well. So obviously, like, he's just teaching advanced stuff. Because I always remembered that, like, the hard teachers and the respected teachers actually were terrible teachers. And they were hard because they didn't know how to teach well. And they were not engaging. But in the incentive structure, like, for whatever reason, we equate, oh, he's a hard teacher to a good teacher, which is, my best teachers I ever had that I actually learned something from were by the institutional objective standard, terrible teachers.
Yeah.
They very little taught out of the textbook or anything, but it was a fun class. Everyone was engaged. And they didn't really, by not teaching us the textbook, they actually, and a lot of it would be like discussion class. I'm thinking of a business law class specifically.
Right.
We didn't touch the notebook or the textbook. All we did was talk about topics and then tie it into concepts of business law and kind of, debate the morality or viewpoints of it, whatever. I learned more in that quarter semester than probably any class the rest of the time I was in school.
Right. Well, it's like, is a quarterback who only knows how to run the plays that are on his wristband a better quarterback than the guy who can actually like run audibles and read a defense and decide, okay, yeah, no, we're not going to run this play. It's not going to work. Right. That quarterback's by an educational standpoint, he's not a good minion. He can't be controlled. He's going rogue. Well, it's like, guess what? The field of play dictates that you need to go rogue every once in a while. Otherwise, you're going to get sacked because we didn't take into account beforehand these varying conditions that I'm observing with my eyes right now. So if I go ahead and follow through on the plan that we decided, it's not going to work. And, this is obviously the frustrations that a lot of people have. The larger the bureaucracy that you're a part of, the more likely your manager, your teacher, the people you work with have to focus their effort and energy towards things that are easily understandable by somebody 7 reporting levels above them. And the only thing that's easily understandable by someone 7 reporting levels above you is a number in an Excel sheet. And so everything needs to be reduced to a number in an Excel sheet. Minimum viable effort will eventually come towards achieving the lowest common, the lowest acceptable performance relative to the KPIs. And that's what you get. That's what you get when you have a large incentive system. That's what you get when you have a large federal government. The larger the organization, and I'm not saying all large organizations are bad because sometimes you need a lot of different people to work on a problem together. But one of the known downsides of expanding organization size is you had more reporting layers between the people who are doing the work and the people who are calling the shots. And then the people who are calling the shots end up calling shots that are not necessarily the best shots to call, but they're the easiest shots to call and transfer and compartmentalize work and transfer it down to the execution level employees and tell them, just do this. All you have to do is do this. You don't have to think of anything else. And guess what? It's also cheaper to find execution level employees who are only smart enough to do what they're told. And if you want to find employees who can think outside the box, well, you're going to have to pay them more. But number 2, you're not actually going to be able to evaluate their work as well. Because if you're not smarter than the person you're evaluating, how do you know if he made a good choice or not by disregarding what you told him?
Mm-hmm. Was it Peter Thiel that said, I believe it's like 10 or 12 is the largest a company can be and still be like very innovative and creative? I think I'm probably mixing that up, but I think it was like 10 or 12 people. When you get beyond that and you start needing to form committees, you need to form boards, you need to form divisions and all that, like you lose almost all the creativity. Because if it's 10 people, I need to know how to do your job. You need to know how to do my job. So the understanding of the product, the company, is every single person's on the same page. You get a bureaucracy and 10,000 employees, there's no way that Steve over there in accounting and Dan over there in marketing are even on the same page with what the company is. There is no culture.
Right.
It's just there might be a small subculture, but it's just this disgusting bureaucratical beast. And that's
Right.
where like, and that's the problem with like school and education is that it's teaching everyone to be the same, where what makes humans great is our individualness,
Right.
is the ability of me to think different from you so that you can have your data points and your view and I can have my data points and my view, and then we can connect, and then it's a 1+1=3 scenario, and not where we know the exact same thing, so it's really a 1+1=2.
Yeah, but that's what happens when curriculum gets decided somewhat at the federal level or even at the state level rather than the county level, right? If you want the most creative teachers to flourish, you actually need to let people teach kids that evolution is wrong, right? It's like it's a really counterintuitive thought because to the bureaucrat, and I'll include anybody with a substantial education, they're almost all bureaucrats. The bureaucrats will say, well, no, how can you allow somebody to teach wrong things? It's like, well, you sort of have to if you're going to provide them with the freedom that's necessary for them to enjoy doing their job and to do it somewhat effectively. Are you willing to withstand some degree of wrong think that's being distributed through your education system if the trade-off is going to be more freedom of expression, which tends to result in better think, right? The bureaucrat thinks, oh no, well, you know, if we just do this, we're going to increase creativity, but then we're going to require them to do that. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that. That only works like that in your imagination. Like real life has real trade-offs, and we need to make the right trade-offs.
Yeah, it's when you look at the entire system like that, it's insane. Then you get the issue when everything's standardized and it's one curriculum or whatever. It's very easy to see what we're seeing now, where it's brainwashing.
Nobody, you get tested on your ability to regurgitate, not your ability to think, because you can't actually test people on their ability to think because the person grading the test needs to be smarter than the person who's taking the test. There's no way to ensure that at scale. That's why people like you can have a 2.0 high school GPA and then 6 years later, whatever, 1.4 or whatever it was. I assumed you were academically eligible to play sports, but maybe that was a wrong assumption.
Until my senior year. That's when I got
sure. Okay, so you had a 2.0 GPA for most of high school. You know, the fact that you could come out of high school with a sub 2.0 GPA and then 6 years later make more money on your computer than anybody working at the school you went to, including the principal, with less hours a day if you want to, that's a failure of the school, right? But they don't look at that as a failure of the school. They look at, oh, you know, Ox is, you know, he overcame adversity. He had a learning disability. It's like, no, fuck you. I'm smart. The fact that I didn't give a shit to score high grades on your test shows that the test is wrong. You're testing the wrong things.
They'll still be, the same people will still be condescending to me. And they'll be like, well, you got lucky. Well, this, well, that, whatever, because they cannot comprehend that you did not live in their little system and do their things. And somehow, if you do any better than them, it is like a stroke of just fate. It was just pure luck. And then I even heard this, that it was my brother, actually, because he was the most follows that path as much as anyone. And he was like, well, it's working right now, but we'll see in, 5 years. And like, that took me back. No, I didn't care. I was like, whatever. We were arguing about the jab. Yeah, it's like people, the genuinely, even your family, me and my brother get along great, but like people genuinely, if you take the alternative route, we'll call it, they want to see you fail so that they can reinforce that their worldview was correct.
Right.
Otherwise, if you succeed, it hurts their ego that maybe, just maybe, people's egos won't allow them to accept this, but they were maybe wrong their whole life.
Right. And this is like a big, wedge between, I think, Democrats and Republicans at the moment. And I have these arguments with my dad all the time because he's a lifelong Democrat. He has a graduate degree. He's been a lawyer. He went to one of the top law schools in the country, high IQ guy. Phi Beta Kappa student, 15 something on his SAT, 1510, 1520, something like that. But he believes every word for the most part that's written in the New York Times. And so, as you can imagine, over the course of my life and my career, I've disagreed with a lot of things that he said. He didn't think I could be a professional athlete, but I became a professional athlete. When I turned down a 90K job offer when I was trying to break into Silicon Valley because I really wanted to work at Google, even though I hadn't set up an interview yet with them, I just decided that I was going to work for them. He thought I was crazy. And time again, when I didn't sell my Bitcoin at 40K, he's like, "What are you doing?" It's like time and time again, he's thought that I've been crazy. And then when the result is good, he either says, "Okay, well, you're a really determined person." So it's like basically you made the square peg fit through the round hole, which I'll admit I do that at times. But if I know I can do it and I do it, then that's actually the smart thing to do. Or you got lucky, right? Because they don't want to realize that if you take a path that the numbers say is the worst path 75% of the time, that doesn't mean it's the worst path for you, right? Academically oriented people love studies, right? Just like bad trainers, bad registered dietitians love studies. But at the end of the day, do you really care if a method only works 25% of the time if you're part of the 25% for whom it works? No, what that is actually an individualized script that you should follow because you're different than the other 75% of people. Whereas at best, most institutional advice that you can get assumes your 50th percentile median in everything, which is maybe sensible as a starting point, but you're not 50th percentile in very many things. Chances are you're 90th percentile in some things, 20th percentile in other things, and you need to figure out, like, if I'm following advice that's meant for the average person, am I average enough for this to make sense for?
Mm-hmm. And that's and it again boils down to you cannot accurately assess someone, you cannot plan curriculum, you cannot do that for a large amount of people because there could be a sorting system of sorts and you could break groups down, into maybe if you had some, I think it's still a terrible idea, but maybe there's some type of aptitude test and you see they're good at this, whatever. So they're going to go learn in this method because it'd probably be better for them or whatever. But the real solution is what we're seeing now. And if I'm really interested, and let's just use computer code because it's probably the most useful skill practically in the world right now. I don't need to go to MIT and go learn computer science. I can literally go online and find someone, honestly, maybe not the most advanced, machine learning and all that, but I can go get my basis for code on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it's scary to the institutionalists because they've invested all of their life, all of their time, all their energy and resources into scaling these institutional ladders where if you get high enough by being a part of the institution, you're guaranteed an audience and a paycheck. So when they see renegades like you and me having success, the initial inclination is to assume they got lucky. Then when they keep having more success, then they say, well, are they cheating? What are they doing? Oh, they're making up fake news, or that's not real science. It's like, well, that's just name calling. The reality is it's very difficult to build an audience if what you're saying is wrong all the time. Now, it's maybe you can keep an audience if you've been right historically and then you're wrong after the fact, but it's very difficult to build an audience if you're wrong all the time. And so a lot of the institutionalists, that is credit that they will not give to the people who are displacing them in terms of societal importance.
Yeah, it's going to be the next 5 years. I'll say 5. Things are going to uproot. Really, whenever we got locked down and we started working from home, that was the beginning of the end for a lot of larger institutions because they learned that they can cut down office space, whatever, and they can just kick you to your house. But then what the average person learned is, wait, I don't need to be married to this corporation and go into work. Like I can get my work done in a couple hours. And then even the smart people found out that I can pay a virtual assistant to do 4 jobs for me.
Yeah.
And I just sit at home. You at that point, you are the CEO, kind of full
Right.
circle in this conversation. But you are the CEO because you now have 4 people doing your, it could even be entry level work from home position.
Right.
And you're just making sure, everything gets done, which is, it's going to be very interesting, especially as decentralization, because when everything's running on separate, a very decentralized network where no one has one point of control, I think people are going to learn that they have much more power and can do much more than what they originally thought, or maybe nothing changes.
Yeah. And it's going to threaten the institutionalists. So they're going to try to crack down on a lot of this stuff, as they already are with like the news and, kicking certain people off of social media. So, well, we hit the hour mark and we haven't really even gotten into fitness. So maybe we can, take the next few minutes on, you just got over an illness. What's been new? What's been new in your routine since last time we chatted? I can't imagine much. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You already have a program that's functional. But what sort of corners have you figured out that you might be able to cut? That you were kind of toying with the last time we chatted. Maybe diet related, maybe training related.
Diet related is, especially with your cookbook. I am done doing bro diets. I haven't eaten a bro diet now in months. That's been like the best part is diet wise. I was very married, even though I knew it wasn't true. I was very married to the idea that I need to eat, chicken, rice, broccoli, whatever, but mostly laziness. But now I'm finding that it's very easy that I can just put in, 10 minutes extra effort a day and I can eat delicious meals.
Yeah.
And then something I learned really is that how resilient the body is. I did not lift weights for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But the whole time I was sick, I made sure to eat, even though I didn't feel like it. I was like, okay. And I kept my protein up and I lost, I kid you not, on each exercise, maybe a rep.
Yeah.
That was it. 2 weeks, not touching. And everyone's like, even 2 weeks, if you listen to studies, is when muscle loss starts to happen. And then add illness on top of that and not eating enough, like you would think, come back super weak. So I'm actually writing about that for tomorrow, is how when you have setbacks, there are ways we can mitigate damage done. And we don't have to throw everything away, because a lot of people are like, oh, poor me. Like I see this with injuries. A lot of athletes get injured and they turn into alcoholics. They're just like, whatever, I can't train. I don't care. I need something to fill the void. I'm just going to drink. They don't care about their diet. They could go from the most strict diet in the world to like, I don't care anymore. I'm not training. It means nothing. And if you can just, stick to what works, even while you're out of the gym doing whatever, when you come back, even if it's months, you're probably not going to be that far. You're probably going to be in a much better place than you thought you were.
Yeah. And I've noticed this, with myself as I've gotten older. Now, this wasn't the case when I was a teenager. And I think if people started lifting weights in their teens and maybe stopped after that, they might have the fear of, well, if I don't go to the gym for a few weeks, I'm going to lose muscle. Well, the reality is most people don't train enough. 99% of the people, of the population doesn't train enough. But the 1% that's pretty diligent about, I'm never going to miss a day. Those guys would actually get better if they miss more days. Right? They don't rest enough, and they don't realize, I remember I was talking to my buddy who played like 8 years in the major leagues. And I was talking about my fitness system. My fitness system is very much oriented on, if your body feels good, push it. If it doesn't, get your rest, get a 90% day in, get a 95% day in, but don't tax your central nervous system if your body isn't feeling it, because all you're going to do is add days to the calendar for when you can come back and actually push yourself to a level that can generate the physiological stimulus that you need to grow and make gains. And so my buddy, 8 years of the major leagues, I think he was going into his last season actually, at the time that we spoke. And he's like, I've just been feeling dragging through training. Everything feels hard. My body just doesn't feel as good. Do I just push through it? And, most coaches will just say, yeah, you push through it. You just push through it and, eventually your body's going to get better. And it's like, I was just like, dude, you've been lifting weights for 13 years now. Do you really think that your body just has like some unlocked hidden strength and endurance that if you just push through this 1 week, you're going to just unlock this oasis of athleticism? Like, no. If you look at your performance from 27 to 32 years old, you're approximately as strong at 32 as you are at 27. Maybe you're 3% stronger. Maybe you're 5% stronger. You're approximately as fast. Maybe you're 2% slower. But it's like pretty much the same. You're not going to turn into a different person, right? So barring a catastrophic injury or like an illness where you don't eat during it, you go 2 weeks of kind of chilling out. Guess what? Ox November 21st is kind of the same ox, same DNA as ox, December 13th. Most, the previous 90 days training history is 90% the same. So do you really think that you're going to be a completely different person, whether you get extra rest or whether you push through it? And it's like, no, you're not going to be a better person. But if you don't get the rest, you're never going to recover enough to get stronger from the stimulus that you're applying to your body.
It was probably the best thing. Well, no. I felt horrible. The brain fog was crazy. I didn't feel horrible. The brain fog was crazy. I wasn't really super sick as much as my energy was gone. But I was trying to, I guess my message to people is this. A lot of people get very neurotic, and I get it. Lifting is amazing for your mental health. It gives a lot of people purpose. It's great. It's awesome. I love it. But a lot of people in my position, and me maybe a few years ago, would have been this person, would freak out, just catastrophic thinking of, oh my gosh, 2 weeks, I'm so small. It would really take a mental hit to them, right? I did not care. I am about 14 and a half weeks out from a show too. Mm-hmm. And I did not care the entire time. I was just like, this is a drop in the bucket. This does not matter. I'm not going to beat myself up. It's fitness. At the end of the day, it is such a blessing to be fit. I've put in all of this work. Like, I don't care. It is okay. There is no stress about that. And I think, a lot of people are counterproductive in their training because something doesn't go wrong, they stress out, and it's like, just relax. This is not life or death. You are so fortunate to be able to control your diet completely. Right. Go work in an air-conditioned gym whenever you want. Like, you are doing something 80, 90% of the world would kill for. So, like, don't stress about it. You're fine. Like, you're going to be okay. If you have a bad year, you're still going to be okay. You have so much life left, unless you're like, 70 years old. But even then, if you've lifted all the way to that point, you're so far ahead, it's not even funny.
That's amazing. We should end on that, that piece of wisdom.
My strange wisdom.
Yes. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. We'll definitely do a round 3 at some point, maybe in January. But until then, signing off. This is Alex.
Ox, I had a question. Are you doing okay? Because you're wearing a shirt, so I'm making sure.
Well, so are you.
That's true.
It's cold. It's cold in Austin.
It is cold. Well.